Alright, we're back for another frame fabrication video. This one's going to be a bit different and the opposite of what I usually do. I'm going to take the chopper out of this frame. This is like an OEM 38 big twin flathead frame, and as you can see, the thing has been chopped up big time. Like that is a knuckle frame beside it, so you can see how high the neck's been pushed up. It's got like 4 inches in it. Some weird stuff going on with this sister bar, some weird stuff going on with these sidecar hoops. And it's got this real crazy bend in these rear legs here. So if you've got a pretty wild old chopper frame that's been cut up and you're looking to take the thing back to at least closer to stock geometry, this is going to be a good video to watch because that's exactly what I'm going to do with this frame. So let's get into it. Alright guys, welcome back to another episode. You guys seem to really enjoy my frame fabrication videos, so I wasn't going to film this one, but I might as well. So this is a frame from my good buddy John Parker, bit of a legend around Brisbane. Any of you old boys that know who it is. He has this 1938 big twin flatty frame, and he wants to turn this thing back into somewhat close to stock geometry. Like as I was saying, this is an OEM sort of geometry knuckle frame. This is like a Craft Tech or something, I'm pretty sure. But this is all the right specs that he wants this thing to be again. So these are the cases out of this. These are actually matching. These cases belong to this frame from factory, so that's pretty cool. So whoever did this weird, chopper modifications on this thing must have fit a different engine, because this engine actually no longer fits. So, a little bit of trivia for you. A knuckle and big twin flatty have different front engine mount heights. So when you run like a big twin or a knuckle or something in like a pan frame or a shovel frame, you have to run a spacer under the front engine mount because the engine mounts are actually different heights. So I'm not sure what's happened with this. This front engine mount has been moved at some point in time, and it no longer fits this. I imagine this had like a pan or something in it, so that's why it's been moved. So the other obvious difference with this frame to this frame is obviously that it's got all this length put in it. Like this is like 4 inches higher than this. So I think I'm gonna have to chop these legs completely out and even take these front sidecar hoops off. I'm even sort of thinking I'm gonna cut this thing all the way back here and remake this. Another bit of trivia for you, this down tube is actually a different size to the rest of the frame. So the rest of the frame is inch, and these down tubes are a little bit bigger. I think they're like 1 1/8 inches or something. So I have material to copy that and copy the inch. So I think I should be able to take this thing back to as close to OEM specs as possible. But as I said, I think I'm gonna have to chop these tubes out completely. There's been some weird stuff hacked into this top casting, so I think that's going to be fun when I start digging into that. So obviously, I think what's happened when they've raised this, they've just heated this, and then that's where this bend's come from. So if that was to be straight and you push that up, that is trying to push this side down. So with any luck, I can do the complete opposite to this. So I think I'm going to put this stock geometry frame in the jig. I'm going to mark where it needs to live. I'm going to mark, probably set up where the sidecar hoops and stuff need to live, mark all that. And then I'm going to put this frame in, and I'm going to bolt it down to the bench, and then cut this stuff out so this neck is just free. And then I'm going to make some sort of puller here, so I can pull down the neck, and then I know it's the right geometry on this, and I can heat this back section at the same time with my oxy. And hopefully we can get that bend out and get these things back to straight, and then get this thing back to stock geometry. So these things are like 28 degrees. So they are under what a usual shovel and pan and stuff is. So at the moment, when they've pushed that thing up, it's put a heap of rake in it too. So I'm hoping I can fix the rake, I can fix the height, and I can fix all this position at the same time. So like I said, the first things first, I think I'm gonna put this frame in and bolt it all down, work out where it lives, mark it on my little tree here so I know where this frame needs to live. and then we'll start cutting this frame and working out how we're exactly going to put this in the in the jig and bend it. So let's get into it. I'll whack this thing in this jig and we'll work out what's going on next. All right, so I have the OEM sort of copy knuckle frame in my jig here. And what I've been doing, I've been just measuring points to make sure when I put the other frame in that I know how to line everything up. Like I've measured everything and I know where that one has to be from this one. So for starters, this is like a V-twin or a Craft Tech or something aftermarket frame. Now these things are made in like India or something, so they're never fucking close. And here's a good example. So this is the sidecar hoop jig that I have to hold the sidecar hoops in the right spot when I weld them out. Look at the difference in heights here. Let me get a rule I can show you. So what are we working with there? We've got like 8 mil there and like, what's that, 3 there. So there's 5 mil out in this bit already. So one of these loops is 5 mil higher than the other, which means it doesn't line up with the center anymore. So if you put a sidecar on this, you'd probably be pretty fucked. So I'm just showing you, this is what happens when you buy these cheaper aftermarket ones. They are never right, they're just close-ish. So because of that, I can only take rough measurements off this thing. I'm just gonna make that thing work really. I'm just gonna put the neck to the same height as this, blah, blah, blah. So I have my neck set up in this. I have the angle here, knuck 28 degrees. So next 28 degrees, that's the height. So I can put that frame in here after I've chopped those bits out. And as I said, I'm gonna have something holding it down that I can adjust and pull the neck down as I heat these back legs up. So the other way I'm gonna do the engine mount, because remember I said this engine mount has something funky going on. Now I can show you. So this engine is sitting in here. Look how badly it's hitting the sidecar loop here, and then look how close from touching it is here. So, you know, I get my finger in there. There's something funky going on here. So what I've done on the knuckle, because my little jig doesn't hold knuckle engine mount sizes, this is a little plate that comes with this frame. So you can make yourself something similar. This is a fine way to do it. So this lines up with all 4 bolt holes, right? And all I've done, because this rear engine mount should be the same on that, obviously I'm gonna measure it. I've just measured the front to the ground here like this. So I've got that rule in there like that, and that's 145 mil. So because I'm gonna cut this off on that frame, all I've got to do is bolt this back bit up, bolt the engine mount that I'm cutting off to this, measure 145 up from the bench, and I know it's in the right spot. So, you know, these aren't aircraft. It doesn't really matter. Just has to be close enough. When you put one of these engines in anyway, you're supposed to shim it. So it doesn't really matter. Just has to be as close as you can physically get it. And then if it's not good enough, you just shim it. So basically that is all the things that I need to measure on this frame. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna take this frame out, I'm gonna bring this frame back over, and we're gonna cut out the stuff we don't need on this frame and then start bending it. So let's get this out and then get that over here. All right, so I have the OEM frame in here now, and you can see the huge rise it's got in it. See that weird little bow that it has in those rear legs? Hoping to get rid of that. But in the neck here, you can see what I'm talking about. This is where the other frame sat, the stock spec. So it sat all the way down here, the bottom of the neck. So you can see how much different it is, how much more rake it's got in it, how much up it's got in it, and just some real funky stuff going on down here with the engine mount. Like this is 5 mil lower than it should be. Like the engine mount should be up there. And then like the sidecar hoops should be at that line. So they're half an inch that way, and the engine mount's 5 mil that way. So as we said, the case hits here on this frame where you can see there's paint missing. So I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do with this yet, because so the engine mount has to go up 5, and these sidecar hoops have to go forward 1/2 inch. So I'm not sure how this bend is going to interact with this engine mount after I move that forward and then up. I don't think this is going to reach anymore. So for the time being, I'm just going to leave that alone. I want to focus on getting this top section to where it should be. So all I'm going to do to start with, I'm just going to hack this off through here on both of these. I'm going to try and hack it below where they've welded it, because that's going to be the easiest spot to try and, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to get the tube out of it they've put in it, but I at least want to get it so maybe the idea of the tube so I can put a slug in it. I'm not too sure yet. So I'm going to cut it down here somewhere, like just below where they've started to weld it on both. And at the top, I'm really not sure because they've cut into the mount. I know this because you can see the porosity in the welding. It must have been oxy welding back in the day thing. I think they might have cut into this, put the tube in and then welded over the top of it. It's hard to tell. So usually on a casting that hasn't been fucked with before, you can cut through the weld and then pull the tube out. That's super easy, but that's not going to happen with this one. So, and it's been welded all the way down here too. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this through here on an angle, get the tube out, and then have a little bit of a poke around in there and see what's going to happen. At the end of the day, I can always put a slug up the inside of this tube and then slide the other tube in it and then weld it. That'll be super strong. But in reality, I would like to get the tube up in there and then weld it, but I just don't think that's going to happen. So like I said, I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to lop this off, lop that off, and then we're going to put this back in the jig like this and try and pull that neck down and fix this bit here. So you're probably wondering why I just went and did something completely different than what I was saying I was going to do. Because under further inspection, see these gold bits where all the welds are? So that is braze or brass soldering. So when you get to work on these old frames like this, back in the day, they never used to weld the shit together. It was all brazed together like this. So they would heat the joint up red hot, they would tin it, so they would put the brass all over it, heat both joints up, tin both joints, and then they would plug them together red hot. And this brass or braze would hold them together. So that is how all these old frames are joined together, with this stuff. Now, when you're someone like me that welds everything, this is an absolute pain in the ass because you can't weld over this shit. It just spits and spatters and you never get a good weld over it. So what I'm going to have to do here, I don't think my little oxy, or my little LPG heater, I should say, will get this hot enough. You have to get this red hot before it lets go. So I'll give it a go, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I might have to go and call a favor and use a buddy's oxy set. I was wondering how they did such a shit weld in there, but makes sense because it's just solder. So I cut this bit out so we can still go ahead and fix this big bend in it, and then we can have a look what's going on here. But in the meantime, I left this bit in here because when I'm heating this up, you want something to be able to hold on to with some vice grips or something to yank this out. That's why I left these bits on long like that. So anyway, I'm going to set this thing up back in the jig here, and we're going to try and sort out this bend in it. All right, so I have this thing back bolted down in the jig, and something I've just noticed. So I'm standing on the center line of the jig here. See how off center the neck is there? So this thing has a big fucking in it that way. It looks like it might have been in an accident. So probably lucky that I'm heating this thing up and moving it because it needs to go that way as well. So just little things to take into account when you are doing this sort of stuff. You can see way off to the side. So all I think I'm going to do with this thing, it's all bolted down where it should be, everything's square. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to get the nut for this. I'm going to put a washer on it. And as I'm heating this up, heating all this area up, I'm just going to rattle it down with, I probably won't get a rattle gun on there, but I'll get a spanner on there and just slowly, inch this thing down with a nut on the top here. And then that should just bring it straight into where it should be. So obviously because we've got this little kick in it too, when it comes down to this radius here, I think I might start putting a bit of heat through here where it's bent, and hopefully I can pull that back as well. So I don't know, I'm just gonna time lapse this. I think you're gonna get pretty bored if you had to watch the whole thing. So as I said, I'm just gonna heat these bits up. So these two legs up while I've got pressure on the neck here pushing down into my little trees here. So let's see what happens here. I might set this up and hopefully you guys can see this move in real time as I've got time lapse going on. All right, so I have the thing pulled down now. So it's pulled down to in the cups here, but there's a few things that sort of haven't really gone the way I wanted. I've still got a bit of this sort of curve in this, so that hasn't worked completely. And I've got a bit of a curve this way now too because I've pulled it down. So I still need to pull this down, and I need to pull that down because I'm a little under on the rake, so it's got a few degrees under what I want. So if I was to pull this guy down, that is going to pull it like that and put more rake in it. So you can see how these went before. You can see how much I've really taken out of it. But if you have a look at the angle that actually goes into the casting, it goes further down this way. So that sort of lines up a bit with this guy now. So that guy just needs to go a bit forward, and then it'll line up with that. And going forward means that our front engine mount stuff might work because that needs to go up and that needs to go forward. So sort of going the way we want it to, but in the back here as well, we got a stress crack here. So that means this is all really brittle, which I'm not really surprised about. But if you have a close-up, see down the tube, it's got all these pitting in it and the tube's not actually round. So I'm not sure what's happened to this frame in its life, but it's like it's full of pitting. See how this is all pitted? I reckon this might have been all pitted from rust and they've tried to weld it up. So this just means the material is super brittle. That's why it's done that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to weld that up and run it or replace this piece yet, but that is another problem I've got to deal with. But I think in the meantime, I'm just going to leave that alone and I'm going to get this geometry right, and then I'll come through and fix that up. So to get this bend out, I think I'm going to have to push this centerpiece. So push that from the ground, I'll put some heat into it, push it that way, and that'll pull that out. And then I'm going to have to pull this down this direction. So weld something to the bench here that goes up to here. And I'm going to pull that down and heat this. So with any luck, this centerpiece here will do this. And then that will do that. And then we'll get the rake that we want here. So I've still got a bit of fiddling to do. So I'm just going to go through now. I think I might do this back section first. I think we'll push that up first and then pull that down, or should we do it at the same time? I'm not sure yet. I'll have a little ponder and then you guys will see in the time lapse. So like you just saw, I was at my buddy Joel's shop using his Oxy, and I managed to get most of this stuff apart with like heaps of heat. You have to get the thing like yellow hot before it comes loose. So a few things I found. This is quite dodgy. This must have been done way back in the day when, you didn't have, welders weren't a huge thing. Everything was brazed. And this is quite dodgy. These old frames, these real early ones, everything's super thin too. Like have a look at these little castings. Like when I pulled it apart, it broke it. Like you can hear how thin they are. Everything with these early castings is super thin. Like I just dropped this and bent it. So this side, the pipe they've used for this is super shit. Like you can see the white in there. That means it was, what's the word for it? Galvanized pipe. So this was galvanized pipe they've used, and when I've heated it up, it's just gone full brittle and broken out. Like the pipe they put in melted before the brass and the braze they put in. So one half's still stuck in the sidecar hoop and the other half is still stuck in the neck. But what I noticed is this has been cut all the way up here. See these marks? That's porosity, all these little holes. That's not from the casting, that's from welding or something they've done to it. So they must have cut it all the way up here and around and put the pipe in instead of slipping it in. So that's super annoying because I'm going to have to come in here and cut all this out, I think, and then lay the pipe in there and weld it in and then weld a door on it so it's like back up to this size. So that is super annoying. This side's not too bad. They just had like a little thing on that to just extend it. So that's easy. I'm just going to put a plug in that and then weld it around. That side's easy. This side's super hard. So I'm going to go through this, cut this out like I said, and then I'm going to make it so that the pipe can lay in there, and then I'm going to get some of the larger size pipe that I've got and weld it over the top and then blend it so you'll never know. So I'm going to go through and start cutting this up. All right, so this is sort of what I was hoping would happen. This is the pipe from the inside. As you can see, it was not brazed very well. Have a look in there. It is dirty as. So you can see how thin all this is too. Like what I was saying, all these castings are super thin. And I think what they've done here, they've cut this out, put the piece in, then welded over the top of it, and then they've just grinded it sort of down. And that's why all this is so super thin now. So that's pretty good. I'm glad I did that because now I can lay the new pipe, which will be this size. So you go, I can lay it in there like that. And then I can weld it in, and then I'm going to put a top on it. So I'm just going to cut the larger size, like section the top out, and then put the top on, and then weld it up. And then I can linish it flat again, and you won't even know. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do this to the other side, and then I'll probably put this in the jig, and we can start working out where pipes are going to go and what I'm going to do with these front sidecar hoops. So I'm going to have to do something pretty similar to this, I think. All right, so I got the frame in the jig here. I have the neck all dug out how I want it. Basically, this is the tube that I'm going to be using that will go from the neck down to the sidecar hoop. And what I've done, I've just made that go in there like that so that when I set this up, I'll be able to just put that into that and then that into there, and I'll weld it in. And then what I'll do, I'll notch another piece of the bigger diameter pipe and put it on the outside as like a doubler, and then I'll weld that in, and then that'll be super strong. So basically what I need to do next is I need to get these sidecar hoops ready to weld in. As you can see, they are nowhere near ready to be welded in. Like when I pulled that out, it had cracks in it here. As you saw in this one, I dropped it, and that's what it did. Like they are super thin. So I'm not really stoked with using that. So I think I'm going to cut these up and I'm going to make new stubs for them. So they're thicker and stronger, and then I can weld them on down here where it's super thick and it'll be strong as. As for this side, I'm not sure yet. I think I'm going to cut it down below the weld here, and hopefully I can pull this pipe out. If not, I'm going to have to, I think, cut it all the way down here and put another socket on it like this side. But I'll get to grinding this thing and we'll see what happens. All right, so I have my little bits here to fix my sidecar hoops. So what I ended up doing, I just chopped the end off this. Have a look how thin that is. So that is the little end piece that was on the end of this guy here. Now, there was no way I was going to weld this back on and it'd be nice and easy, and there was no way I was going to braze it back on too because of all of this. So what I ended up doing is I obviously want to keep as many of these original castings as possible. So I made these guys. So these are pretty well an exact copy of that, just thicker material and nicer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put big chamfers on this and this, and I'm going to weld that guy back on there like that. So once I weld that back on there and blend it, it's going to look exactly the same as that once you weld it together and paint it. So that guy goes on the end like that. And then I made these little bungs. So these little bungs will hammer into this side of the casting, and you can see they're stepped. So the larger size goes in the casting, and then this thinner size will go in the tube that I'm using to go to the top. So that'll butt into there, and then I will butt the tube into the end of this, and same thing, I'm going to chamfer this and then put heaps of weld around it. So it'll be super, super strong. Don't have to worry about that going anywhere. And then this casting will look factory, and it'll be even stronger than it was before. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to weld all these castings up, well, weld these ends on them anyway, hammer these guys into the ends, and then we can put them into our jig and then start working out this pipe here, these down tubes. All right, so I have my front sidecar hoops sorted out here. As you can see, I just welded that thing on there, blended it nicely. I made sure that the inside was super smooth so that it would go on here like that. As you can see, it lines up nicely. There's like an inch of engagement in that. So plenty of material. It goes all the way down into here, into the casting. So that'll be super strong. That'll just get a weld around the top. And I'll blend it so it looks like it's been brazed like the rest. And obviously in the end, I put this spigot in. So that'll sit like that. And then the pipe will just go from the top to the bottom. And thinking about this, because this pipe's a little bit smaller than this outer, what I'm going to do, I'm going to work out this pipe length. I'm going to tack it in, and then I'm going to make a little collar that goes on here that welds on there so it looks like it blends a bit better, like an original frame does. So if I just keep this pipe in, I can put it in the lathe, and then I can machine it and make it look super nice. So I'm going to set these up in my little jig here, and then we'll come back and have a look at this pipe that we're going to have to do through here. All right, so I got this frame pretty well sorted out, but have a look at this that's outside my house. Oh, is it there? Yeah, look at that. That is a freaking drone. And that is spraying my property for fire ants. How crazy is that? The thing is huge. Now you're saying it's like completely unmanned. So he can just set where he wants it to go on a map, and it'll go there in a grid pattern, and it'll spray everything and then come back when it needs grain and then fuck off again all by itself. Anyway, back to this. So I have my little sidecar hoops put in here. I've just got these little short bits of pipe in there, and that's just so I know which direction the spigots are pointing on the bottom of this hoops. So I know that they're perfectly in line with my engine mount here and are perfectly good for a weld. So all I did, I went and cut a piece somewhere near the right length so that I can put it in my spigot and then make sure it lines up with my little hole here, which it does. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to knock that the whole way in, make sure this is all square and everything. I'm going to tack this down because I've just got it floating around because I'm not exactly sure where it wants to live yet, so all this is right. When I work that out, I'm going to tack this down. I'm going to cut both of these. I'm going to fit both of them. And then I reckon we'll start tacking some stuff here, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what we're up to. Yeah, look, it's coming in for a landing. See that little post there? That must be what talks to it. And you can see how big the damn thing is. Look at the size of it. All right, so the spraying drone's gone now. I can do some work here. So what I did here was I just put some clamps on these bottom pipes here. So obviously the front engine mount's exactly where I want it to be. It was a bit flimsy, so I just tacked this little guy in here. No big deal. So what I've done was obviously I need the outlets for the spigots to be straight so they go through this front engine mount nicely. So that's all sweet. So the way I held them in position was I just put some clamps on them and then that's sweet. I've tacked down my front little mount here in the right spot, so that's all sweet. And I have my pipes at the desired length. I've just got this little guy holding them together so they don't move. So that's all sweet. So what I did there, I just tacked that up. So I just put a few tacks around this just so it wouldn't move. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna completely weld that the whole way around, but I'm not gonna tack the top so that I can take these sidecar hoops off with this tube attached and I can put them in the lathe. And I just wanna machine a little collar, I think, that sits on here with a nice taper on it. So it tapers off a bit nicer like an original one does. Have a look at this one. This isn't original, but you can see how it's a bit longer and it tapers off nicely. I want to do that with these front ones. And in doing that, I can do a whole weld here and then put a collar on it, and then I'll put a chamfer on this again, do a weld around that, and then a weld around the top. So it's got a bung in the middle, it's got 3 welds around it with a tapered socket on it. So this front section is going to be super strong. So I'm going to go through, weld that up, and when we come back, I will be over at the lathe making some little bits to make this look sweet. All right, so what I got here, I have put my pipe here. So I've just taken it out of the jig and I have put it in the lathe, and I've just machined the weld off into a nice 45-degree chamfer there. So basically what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to machine up 2 of these like I already have. So it just has the same chamfer as that on this side, and then it's just square on the other side. So what I'm basically going to do with this, that's going to slip on there like that, go down there, and you can see that I have a weld prep around this again. So I'm going to weld this completely around there again, and then the same up the top. Weld that completely around and weld that completely around. And then we will put it back in the lathe here. So when that's welded on there, and I'm going to machine this on a taper so it looks original again. So I'm going to go through, I'll weld these 2 up, and then we'll come back and look at it when I'm machining the taper, I reckon. All right, so these are the 2 welded up now. So this one's cool enough to handle. So this is the sort of factory-ish one that I'm copying. So you can see it has the same body now. Obviously, it just looks super fat because this bit is all square still. So what we'll do, we will put that in the lathe here, and I might time-lapse this and show you. But I'll go through and I'll machine all this and then put a taper on it and then machine it all so it's all flush into the body so we're not going to notice it. But you can see what I was saying about heaps of contact. So I have the 1 weld on the inside here, 2 and then 3. So there's heaps of contact onto this sidecar loop. Not that these down tubes have heaps of pressure on them. They're more in tension than compression. But this is more than enough. So I'm going to machine all this so it's nice and flush and tapered like this guy. And I'll do that on both. And then we can put the thing back in the machine. All right, so this is the end result with our sidecar loops. They turned out super nice. I probably should have given you the heads up to put this engine in before you welded this stuff. I did that just to make sure because these are always super close on here. So this thing was booger welded up when I first started playing with it. So I've taken a lot of material off there. That engine can move back a bit yet. So that's just sitting in there loosely. That's all sweet, but you can see they turned out super nice. Lick of paint and you wouldn't even know the difference. So basically I've just got these things sitting up here now. They're just sitting in here, but you don't want to tack this yet because you want to be able to take this front section apart because this bottom section is going to be slip in that way and slip in that way. So you want to be able to slip it all together and then weld this last. So basically what we're going to do here, as I said, I just machined up these because I didn't have much spare inch because this is inch and this is 1.1 like we said. So that just lives up in there like that. So basically what we need to do is have one bend that goes across and like that. So we need to fix it this side as well. Obviously this side's got a slip joint, but this side is just a pipe. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to machine some slugs like we did here and put some slugs in there so that we can slip the inch pipe into the slug and then weld it around and buff it and you won't see it. So before we do that, I need to pull this apart a bit and I need to start working out what angle this bend's going to be. So let me sort this out and we'll come back and have a look. All right, so I got this thing pretty well set up here to work out my bends to complete this frame again. So what I've done in the meantime, I've put slugs in both of these tubes. So I just made the slug go in to like here. So I made it like 2 inches inside this pipe, just because on this side in particular, these early as frames are super thin. Like you can see just how thin that frame is. And like getting that casting out's already got a crack in it. So what I did was I made this slug super long so that it picks up this main support here. So it goes all the way down into here so that this is super strong again. And the other thing I did, I put these little holes in here. So before I put the slug in, I drilled a hole the whole way through on both of them. And that is so that you can weld that up in there and join this to that so that this piece doesn't move inside. But when I put this on, I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap so I can weld all three together. So that's super strong because I'm going to finish this flat so it's not there anymore so you don't see the weld. So basically what I need to do now is I need to work out this bend. Now this is a bit of tube that I cut off on the last frame video. If you haven't watched that, go back where I make the Born to Lose giveaway frame. So this is a piece that I had to cut off and not use, but it's going to be super handy because it has this mark on it. And that mark I can translate onto this piece and that's going to show us where to bend this piece. So all I need to do, I'm going to put that onto there like that so that slips on nicely. And then I'm going to get this piece. This is just an inch piece to go onto there so that holds it up. And then we're going to put this piece on here like that. So what that's going to do, we can get down like this and we can line this piece up with our little socket where it needs to go. So I can line that up like that. I know what bend this is as well. I know this is a 44-degree bend because that's what all standard stuff is. So all I have to do, line this up, get that in the right spot, and then all I do is get my paint pen here, and then I put my line here. I want the bend to go that direction, and it's 44 degrees. So now when I bend that direction, 44 degrees, that's gonna come up, and then all I have to do is put it on there, cut it to the length where I need it in here, and then it should slide together. Remember we left these not tacked so we could take this out and put it all together when it's all done. So I'm going to go through, I'll bend both of these, both sides, and then we'll come back and put this frame together. All right, so I have my little piece here. This is the guy I just bent up. I've just gone in here a few times and just shortened it up so that this sort of landed in the right position like that. So the reason we haven't welded this guy in yet is so that we can put this together. Because if this was welded in, this has got to slug both sides. It goes in this side like that, and then it goes in this side like that. So if we had this piece welded in, there's no way we could have put it in. So basically what we want to do is we want to knock this together. This actually turned out quite nice, so I'm happy with how this turned out. It took a little bit of fiddling, but I got there in the end. So that goes, threads down, this goes, come on mate, wait a second. That goes in there like that. That slides down like that. That does up. You can see the top goes in. This guy does up. Just want to pull that back where it needs to be. I can do up my little sidecar guy here. Done up. Nice and tight. I've got this guy underneath, so it's exactly the same height across the bottom, so it's perfectly flat. As you can see, I've got the other side done already, so this guy's pretty well ready to weld up. You can see I've got this gap here. That's like a couple mil gap, and that's going to be perfect to weld all three together. So you can do a root run around it, weld that little slug on the inside in, and then you can do a cap weld and then weld both pipes together. So I want to linish that flat so it looks like it was never there, and that's the best way to do it. You've got that big valley of weld in there after you take it off. So the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to weld my little slug in too. So I'll tack that in, I'll weld that, start welding this shit together, and I can finally tack the top because I don't want this to come apart again. So we're pretty well getting there. That'll be pretty well the bottom section done. All we'll have to do is weld this little filler piece on the top that I want to make yet, but I'll show you that later. Let's go through, and I think I might even just start welding this out. There's not much point in tacking it because there's nothing else I want to put in here. So I might just go around, tack everything a heat, and then I might put a bit of pressure on that to keep these together. And then we'll weld it out, I reckon. All right, so I have most of this frame welded out here, and I have this section all completely welded out. Now the last bit I want to do here is this. So I just made this, as you can see, that's where he lives. So once I weld all of that up and then do a weld across the bottom and blend that, it's going to look perfect. You're not going to see this weld in here, and like I said, that will go in there just like that. And I can fill all that as a weld prep, so this will become structural as well. So all I did to make this was I just used a bit of pipe that is the right ID for this tube that I'm using. So that goes in there like that, that's perfect ID. And I just slowly roughed it out until I came up with this piece. And I made it the right length as an OEM frame. So once I weld that in there, I'll do a weld across the bottom and then it will look factory. It'll look a lot like this one. So it'll have this nice weld at the bottom. All this will be linished flush like that, and you won't even know the difference once it's painted. So I'm gonna go through, I'm still gonna make the other side yet. So I'll go through, make this one. Yeah, they're not very close, but I'll go through, make this side, and then we'll come through and weld all this, and then we'll start blending. I have both sides on now, both tacked in. I just wanted to show you how much weld prep I've got. So you can see there's a massive weld prep around the whole thing. So once I grind the weld off flush again, it'll be just as strong, won't lose any strength. So obviously I'm gonna weld the whole way around and then across the bottom. So it'll look factory again. This is how this one ended up. Same sort of deal. Plenty of weld prep in there. It's gonna look so good once I blend it. So I'm gonna go through now and weld this out and make it happen. All right, so that is pretty well this casting all fixed up. You saw I went in and I welded this little rib up all the way down onto the piece, the piece where I added. It was like just here. I welded this rib all the way down on it because I wanted to continue that and then make it look factory. When you're doing that, don't be afraid to use like your 1mm cutting disc to shape this. As long as you're not putting heaps of side load on it, it's fine. It won't blow up on you. Everyone tells you not to use them as a grinding tool, but to get into these little corners and really tight areas like this, you have to use them. As long as you're nice and easy on them, they won't blow up on you. So that is that side all shaped up. I still got to finish some stuff here, but don't worry about that. That's all shaped up. I just got to go through and do this side now, and then that is pretty well the frame finished. The only thing I want to do next is fix this rear leg here that cracked up big time because some repair that's been done there. So let me go through, I'm gonna finish all of this and then we'll come back and do the last little bit, which is finishing this guy off. All right, so I have my frame back in the jig here. I have done all of my neck stuff, finished welding it. What else have I done? Oh, I forgot my little floorboard mounts here. So I've put them back on. When I took them off, I took measurement of where they were in my jig and what angle they were. This one was 33 degrees and that one was 37. That might not be OEM stuff, but that is what they were when I took them off. So I just put them back on where they lived before. I just need to weld them out, so I'll do that when I take this out again. But basically the only thing left on this frame now is to fix this absolutely butchered rear leg. So like I was saying, I reckon this thing was either had an accident or it was full of, you know, little rust pits like this. And I reckon they would have just run down this with a welder and just or oxy welded it or something to fix it up. And it's just made it super brittle. So as soon as I went to move it, it just cracked heaps down here. And the thing is like nowhere near round. Like it just has humps and lumps and shit everywhere. So I'm going to try and replace it from like down here somewhere up to here. I don't want to fuck around and have to try and pull, you know, these bits of pipe out of the castings and have all that trouble like I did with the neck and everything else. So I'm going to just slug it. So I'm going to cut it somewhere here and then slug it down into the casting so it's just as strong. And I don't want to have to cut this casting apart to get this pipe out and then have to press this flat piece and then take all that braze out. That's just a pain. So I want to leave all this and do it just after it there. So maybe just after where the bend stops, so I can just put a straight bit in. So somewhere there, it looks pretty nice. The cracks only start down here. So if I slug it all the way up here, it should be super strong. The only thing I'm gonna have to deal with is this crossbar, which does have brazed stuff in there. So I'm gonna have to see what that does, but I'm just gonna chop it out and grind it, make sure it lives where it wants to live. So I'm gonna go through now, I'm gonna chop this piece out, and then I have a bit of tube to replace it here, and then we will work out what we're gonna do for slugs and stuff to put in here. All right, so I was pretty spot on with what I was saying. Must have just been welded up, and you can see by how much it's blown through there. That is MIG wire just there you're seeing where someone's blown through, and you can see it's just been all booger welded up. Let me get a little torch here. Have a look in there. See all the little welds in there? So it's just blown through, and that is the residue from it. So this side of the back though has like 3 different sleeves in it. It's got like an outer, and then it has an inner and then another inner. So that is super thick going into the casting, which is good. So that'll be super strong. But with these two, so I ended up cutting this middle bit out. I didn't tell you that. I cut this middle bit out to make it a bit easier to put this together, because this is easy to run a weld around and fix up. You won't even notice. So I'll be able to take this off now. I can fix up all this thing, and then when I put it back on, it'll look factory again. And then I can fit this piece, and then with any luck, I can just switch that in there like that and fit that, just to make my life a little bit easier. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna die grind all these round, try and get all these, you know, like bits of lump and crap out of there so that I can hammer a slug in there. So I'm going to slug all 3 of these, and I'm going to do something a bit tricky, because obviously a slug in both sides is super tricky to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to window the pipe on the bottom, and then I can fit it over the slug and then weld it up completely, and then linish it, and you won't even know the difference. So I'm going to go through, clean these up, and then we'll come back and fit some stuff. All right, just something I wanted to touch on while I was doing it. See how this pipe is not straight? See how it's got that gradual little bend in it? If I was just to put a straight pipe in there, it would look absolutely fucked and stand out like dog's balls. So I want to simulate the same bend on this side. So the way I did that was I cut my bit of pipe somewhere. I'll always leave a little bit over, but just a bit longer than what I wanted. And what I did was I just set up two little guys like that off the bench. And then I measured how much I need it to bend. So the way I did that, I just marked on this side the same marks as that side. And then I put a straight edge between those 2 marks. And then I measured the middle. So that was like 7 mil. So what I did over here, I just got this pipe and then measured from the bottom and took 7 mil off it and bent it. So as you can see, I've already bent this. See how it's no longer round? All I did to bend that, I just got like a dead blow like this that had a soft wooden bit to it, and then I just kept hitting it until we simulated that bow. So I've got this down to the right amount now, so that's bent about 7 mil. So we can come over, put that straight on there like that, and as you can see, it is exactly the same now. We have the same bend in it and everything. So when we put it in this side and paint it, you won't even notice the difference. So just a quick little trick like that. You don't need a big press to do that stuff. Just do it with a trusty hammer with a little bit of patience and it'll happen. So now I'm gonna cut that piece to size so it fits in here nicely, and then make these little bungs that I was talking about, and then put all this together. All right, I have this rear section pretty well sorted out now. I have bungs in all 3 of my bits now. So basically to put this together, you just knock that guy in there like that. So he's bunged. He's got the weld holes in it too to keep the slug in the right spot. So does this guy. Can weld that slug in the right spot. And then this guy. So this is cut to length. This is our bent guy. I have a little line down the center, and that shows me where the top of the bend is. But obviously because we have 2 slugs each side, I can't slide it in both sides. So I just windowed the bottom of it. So this guy will go on to that one, and then the window will work like that. And then the other thing with this line, we can just line that up at the top, and we know that that is the bend. So basically what we're going to do with this window, I'll just weld that completely out like that, and then I'll get the bit that I cut, this guy, and I'll just make that fit again, and I'll weld it in, so it'll be super, super strong. So basically I'm going to go through, let's weld this guy, and then that's pretty well this frame done. As you can see, it's afternoon now. I want to get this thing done today, so we're almost there. All right, so that is the frame pretty well done. I have all this all welded up now. Turned out super nice after I gave it a once over with my little pipe buff. This is that under there. You can see that turned out nice. That's where I had to put that window in, so you can't even notice it. So that'll be super strong through there. Obviously welded this back together. Can't even notice. Super strong. All this super strong. Won't see any of this once there's a bit of paint on it. So the other thing I forgot was this center mount for the tanks. So I put him on. That's all completely welded out. My floorboard mount's here. So that is it. I'm going to buff this thing up and then give it a quick lick of paint. Nothing special, just a little can job to stop this thing from rusting. Alright, that is pretty well the frame completely done now. As you saw, I just put a little lick of black paint on it. Nothing that's going to stay, it's just to stop it from rusting, because you have no idea how long these projects might sit around before the customer, like John, ends up getting around to putting the bike together. He's got to build this engine completely, he's got to do a gearbox, he's got to put a whole thing together yet. Be a real pity if the frame's rusted out by the time he gets to putting it together. So anyway, if this is the sort of content you like watching, please let me know in the comments. I want to sort of tailor what I film to people's interest, so I'm not filming crap that no one watches. So thanks again for watching this one, guys. I'm going to be trying to put out a video every week from now on, so let's see how I go.